Happy Thanksgiving to those that celebrate, and even if you don't, I am very thankful for all of you on the channel. The support you guys give me is ridiculous, and it makes my day making these videos for you guys. But we're in Qatar for Formula 1 this weekend, a very difficult and technical track where every single car will have a different spec here. Upgrades are going to be far and few because we are coming to the end of the season, and with the road trip going from America to Qatar within a week, teams can bring very little specs here, but it's going to be important to see what they've brought and how they can optimize their car going into this weekend. Ferrari's got a couple of interesting parts, Mercedes as well, that we're going to go over. And if you're new here, go ahead and subscribe, but let's get started with the rear wings here in Qatar. First four teams we're going to look at is Red Bull, Mercedes, McLaren, and Ferrari. As for the Red Bull rear wing, it's a wing that we've seen throughout the season multiple times. Zandvoort is a track that I can think of that we saw it at last time. It's a medium to high downforce. They have added the gurney flap to the top of its rear wing spec for a little bit more downforce. They can pick and choose whether they want this for FP1 or not. It's always something to be optimized, little parts here and there on that wing. But FP1 is going to be a very tricky session. It's going to be dusty, not a lot of grip. A lot of teams are going to be going sprint qualifying, not really knowing what the pecking order is going to be. But being able to bolt on enough downforce to actually be good in that cornering is the important part here in Qatar. Even with the big straight, you want the DRS effectiveness, but tire stress is the most important key. It's going to be a completely different race to 2023. And with that being said, the Mercedes has also brought a medium to high downforce, about the same as the Red Bull. The Red Bull does have a bigger upper plane. It's always been a prominent thing on their rear wing. Well, the Mercedes has always liked a bit of a deeper lower plane on its rear wing. This is definitely going to be the car to look out for in this weekend as it's much colder conditions, and that's something that we're going to discuss very, very soon as well. McLaren has also brought a medium to high downforce rear wing. You're going to see the common trend here. You need the downforce for the cornering. It's a lot of high speed, but grip is super important here as it can be very difficult to find through the weekend because the track tends to get dusty, as I've said. McLaren is also a team to look out for here. They're very good in those high-speed corners. Whenever they bolt on a rear wing like this, like Zandvoort, for example, they did very, very well. Ferrari is also another team that's obviously within this top four. It's going to be very close between all of them. They have a medium to high downforce. They've ran pretty well with this wing throughout the season, but they've got a couple of interesting parts here in combination with this rear wing that I think could make for either a test this weekend or what they're trying to do to actually catch up to McLaren and try and win this Constructors by the end of 2024. The next four teams we're going to look into is Aston Martin, Alpine, Sauber, and the Haas car. The Aston team did super well in 2023. They're also running medium to high downforce. As I said, this will be the trend here with the exception of the next team we're going to cover. And this could be a good track for them as it's pretty flat. They run the car very low. They're the second lowest car. Mercedes is first, then it's them. I guess that has a lot to do with the rear suspension and the way that it's working in combination with that rear part of the car. It's also why they shred their tires very quickly, but colder conditions, maybe it works a bit better. As for the Alpine, it's the only team so far that I've seen that is actually running a medium downforce, and that has a lot to do with obviously their top speed always being deficient and them needing to run a bit of a lower downforce rear wing to help out in the weekend, especially in that straight. They've been a very good car. Brazil was such a good weekend for them. I kind of expect Qatar to be also pretty good. Their tire wear has actually been pretty decent. And overall, this car on tracks with more downforce, it's been a pretty damn good car. So let's see if Alpine can make the most out of it. They're keeping the pink livery too, which I think looks better than what they've been running throughout the season. Sauber changed back what was a beautiful livery, but the team is running a pretty high downforce rear wing. I think it's got a bit more than the actual Aston and the Alpine itself. So let's see if they've actually gained a bit of performance. They've been lacking it. They need it. Qatar is going to be a good test for them, but I still expect them to be around that P10 range. Haas is running what is close to the Alpine, but I still think a bit higher medium to high downforce on the rear wing here. Haas will be a team to look out for. They've been very good on every single track, but they do have the same weaknesses as the Ferrari. So this could be a weekend when they're a little bit weaker and every team is super close and they don't have that kind of P6 defined role because they've been the team always kind of scrapping for those points. Aston has lost that position. It'll be interesting to see how Haas does here. But starting off with the Ferrari, yes, no upgrades, but we do see that 2025 floor spec brought here to Qatar, which I suspected. A lot of people thought it was just going to be used in Vegas, but I always thought if they're going to test this floor out, they should test it on a track where they're weak. It's interesting that they're deciding to run it here. They might even keep it for the weekend, as it's only going to be one FP1 session. Will it work? Will it not? They don't have spares for this, so it's going to be a real test. It's on Charles Leclerc's car here, at least in these pit lane pictures. It'll be very interesting to see if it's working in these fast speed corners where the car has just not had the downforce. They've either had problems with porpoising or in general just not being able to have the balance. Another interesting thing to note from this picture is look at the cooling. It's just one cooling rate towards the back, when the complete opposite was in 2023, where the whole car itself was pretty much kitted in cooling because it was a very hot track, almost about 40 Celsius completely throughout the whole weekend. We're down another 20 Celsius degrees, so it's going to be a completely different GP for all these drivers and teams. They also are running that Singapore front wing, which obviously is expected. They were running a Monza style front wing for that of Vegas. So it'll be the first time that we see the true combination of what is supposed to be the base of the 2025 car. The front wing itself has already been talked about as being a base for the 2025, but now with the floor combination, maybe it works much better. They did say that the correlation itself was working, but it wasn't necessarily to the performance that they wanted it to be. So I'm interested to see what Ferrari can do here. They're definitely my number 4 team right now out of the top 4, especially because it's a bit of colder conditions. So this will be a big test for them, much bigger than Vegas was itself. Quickly looking at Mercedes, I am definitely going to be looking at the onboards for this car in this race. I want to see if we can see that steering wheel being pulled out and if there's any type of advantage being gained. I still believe this to be nothing and really just the steering column itself being a bit more loose than the other cars. But it'll be interesting to note when it's coming out and in. They're definitely going to be one of the most followed teams this weekend. But for them as well, almost minimal cooling on the car, which has been very uncommon for them in this season, as the team needs to run a lot of cooling from the way that the car setup is. But as I said, it's been cold. It's going to be continued to be cold in the weekend. So this will be the trend alongside the rest of the grid. They're also going to be running a front wing that has a bit of higher downforce in comparison to that of Vegas. And what was very interesting to note was that their actual old spec of wing was in the paddock. I'm not sure why they actually brought it to this GP, but it is there. So maybe there is some possibility of that being tested. I don't really think so, but very interesting to see it as one of the specs they brought here. Also quickly to go over the Aston car. Yes, the green tractor. It is running a different front wing, funny enough. It's running the actual beginning spec front wing. No upgrades on this bad boy. It doesn't have that cutout like it typically did to bring more air to that of the front cooling on the brakes. Aston Martin will run with that front wing combination. The side pods originally from Suzuka. Yes, there are some changes to that engine cover. They have added that part to the halo that was added in Hungary, but the floor spec itself is Hungary, which is very interesting to note. They've already said that the Suzuka spec was the better spec. That was a 7 months ago upgrade. I'm really not sure what this team is doing. It's probably just another couple of tests before the end of the season. It will be interesting to see what type of performance they can actually gain out of this spec of car with another version of this front wing, and yet again, pretty much de-upgrading the car. McLaren is also back to the front wing spec with a bit more higher downforce. We've seen this throughout the season. They are most people's favorites for this GP, but Mercedes will be up there. Oscar and Lando have already said that Mercedes could be the team to beat with these cold conditions, but expect this car to perform at its highest peak that it can. High speed corners, medium speed corners, it's always been good, and just the most balanced beast out of all of them in the top 4. But that's pretty much all we have for Qatar. It's one of those weekends where there's not going to be too much to be talked about. It's going to be more about how you can make the most out of the setup that you currently have. Upgrades will be far and few, same with Abu Dhabi, so just have that expected for these videos. Regardless, thankful for you all. Hope you guys all have a nice day. Please leave a like, subscribe, it would mean the world, and peace.